They mocked the homeless woman until she opened a box. No one expected. She sat on the cold concrete with her back pressed against the brick wall, clutching a small wooden box so tightly to her chest it looked as if her life depended on it. People passed her every day without stopping, some throwing a quick glance, others pretending not to see her at all. Yet everyone noticed the box. It was scratched, faded, and sealed with a rusty little latch, and for reasons no one understood, she never let it go. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The woman had become a familiar sight on that street corner. Her coat, once beige, was now more gray than anything else, torn at the sleeves and frayed at the edges. Strands of her dark hair stuck out wildly, unbrushed and tangled, hiding half of her face. She rarely spoke. When she did, it was usually to herself, muttering quietly as she stroked the top of the wooden box with her fingertips, as if soothing a child. Most people didn't care to know her story. They saw only what was on the surface: another homeless woman, another burden on the sidewalk, another reason to cross the street. They didn't know her name. They didn't ask. To them, she was just that crazy lady with the box. Children who walked past with their parents asked what was inside. Their parents hushed them and pulled them away. Teenagers were less polite. They whispered and laughed, sometimes circling her in groups, daring each other to touch the box. She would always pull it closer, curling her body around it like a shield, eyes flashing with a sudden, desperate fear that seemed too deep for words. The kids would laugh harder. On rainy days, she sat under the shallow overhang of a shop that had been closed for years. Water dripped through cracks above her, running down her shoulders, but she didn't move. She just pulled her knees tighter to her chest, the box balanced carefully in her lap. Some passers-by left coins in a paper cup beside her, though fewer and fewer bothered. It wasn't hunger she seemed afraid of. It wasn't even the cold. It was the idea of losing that box. Rumors started to spread. Some said the box was empty, that she only pretended it was valuable because her mind had slipped away. Others claimed it held garbage, bits of string, bottle caps, or scraps she had picked from the trash. One man joked loudly to his friends that maybe she carried gold bars in there, and the street filled with their laughter. Everyone agreed on one thing: she was strange, and the box was stranger. The more she was mocked, the more tightly she clung to it. Her thin arms wrapped around it when she slept, her chin resting on its rough surface. At times, when she thought no one was watching, her lips pressed against it gently, like a mother comforting a child. In those quiet moments, her eyes softened, and it was clear this battered wooden box meant more to her than anyone passing by could ever guess. Yet no matter how cruel the whispers, no matter how harsh the stares, she never explained herself. She never offered anyone a single clue about what was locked inside. And that mystery was what kept people talking. The woman on the corner with the box, ignored by most, ridiculed by many, and understood by none. What they didn't know was that the box held a secret that would one day silence the laughter, stop the cruel jokes, and force every single person who had ever mocked her to look at her differently. But for now, she sat quietly on her corner, clutching it with everything she had left. And the world, too busy to care, walked past without ever suspecting what she was holding on to. The laughter started small, just a few giggles here and there, but it grew until it echoed down the street. A group of teenagers had spotted her again. They pointed at the woman sitting against the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around the wooden box, as if it were the last thing holding her to the earth. One boy cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Hey, lady, what's in the box? A magic lamp? Or maybe just your brain you forgot to use. His friends howled with laughter, their sneakers scraping the pavement as they circled closer. The woman shrank into herself, her shoulders hunched, her knees pulled tighter against her chest. She tried to make herself small, invisible, but she couldn't hide the box. That box was always visible, and that was exactly what they wanted. One girl leaned forward as if to grab it, but pulled back at the last second, laughing in the boy's ear. "She thinks it's treasure," she said. "She'd probably kill us if we touched it." People walking by slowed down. Some glanced at the scene with curiosity, others with annoyance. A man carrying groceries muttered under his breath and shook his head. He didn't step in. A woman pulling her child along tugged harder, urging the girl to look away. No one stopped to help. It wasn't their problem. For weeks now, the box had become a target. It wasn't just the kids either. Adults joined in, though their cruelty was quieter, sharper. "Pathetic," one man whispered to his wife as they passed. "Clinging to garbage like it's gold." Another woman, dressed in a tailored coat, smirked and said loud enough for the woman to hear, "Maybe it's full of scraps from the trash can she eats out of." The homeless woman heard every word, even when they thought she didn't. Her fingers tightened around the box, her knuckles white. At night, the mocking didn't stop. Teenagers on their way home from parties stumbled past her corner, their laughter loud and merciless. They kicked at her empty paper cup, spilling the few coins inside onto the wet pavement. "Why don't you sell that box, lady?" one slurred. "Oh, wait, you'd have to open it first." They laughed until their voices disappeared down the street, leaving her in silence. She gathered the coins back into the cup with trembling hands, her face pale in the dim glow of the streetlight. It was always the same. People saw her, but they didn't see her. They saw the dirt on her coat, the tangled hair, the box she guarded like it was priceless. And to them, that made her a joke. The woman rarely fought back. Once, when a boy tried to yank the box from her lap, she let out a sound that froze him in place. It wasn't a scream, not exactly. It was deeper, rawer, something that sounded more like a wound than a voice. The boy jerked back, startled, before pretending he wasn't scared. "She's nuts," he said to his friends, though his face was pale. They laughed again, covering their unease. Still, she never left the corner. Every morning she was there before the shops opened. Every night she stayed until the last car had passed. She curled herself around the box to sleep, her thin body shielding it from the world. To her, it was worth every stare, every insult, every cruel joke. To the people around her, it was the very thing that made her so easy to mock. The box had become her identity in their eyes. They didn't call her by name because they didn't know it. They didn't ask where she came from or why she ended up here. She was only the woman with the box. And with every laugh, every cruel word, every mocking glance, her silence grew heavier. But in that silence, there was something no one else could hear. A story pressed tight against her chest, locked inside the box, waiting for the day when she would no longer hide it. And when that day came, the same people who mocked her would wish they had never laughed at all. By now, the box wasn't just an object. It was a rumor, a talking point that traveled from one corner of the neighborhood to the next. People who had never even spoken to the woman found themselves speculating about what she carried. The kids at the convenience store joked that maybe she had bones inside, stolen from some graveyard. One delivery driver swore he heard rattling when she shifted it from one arm to the other, and he told the story so many times it became proof that the box was filled with something sinister. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was the story people created around her. Each day brought a new version. Some said she carried nothing at all, that she was too far gone in her mind to realize the box was empty. Others claimed she had locked away old food inside, and the smell would eventually give her away. One man, sitting at the bus stop, leaned toward another and said, "She's probably hiding drugs in there. Why else would she guard it like that?" The second man nodded, as if that solved everything. The woman heard more than they thought. She kept her head low, eyes focused on the box, but her ears caught every word. Each whisper made her arms tighten. Each laugh drove her deeper into herself. Still, she never explained. She never opened it. She never gave them the satisfaction of knowing. Even those who pitied her couldn't resist adding to the talk. "Poor thing," one older lady said while dropping a coin in her cup. "It must just be junk. Still, it's all she has left, I guess." Her friend replied, "Or maybe she's hiding from her past in there." The two women shook their heads and walked on, convinced they had glimpsed her story in full. As days turned into weeks, the box became a kind of legend. People who lived blocks away knew about it. Strangers came just to see her, to look at the woman who never let go of the mysterious wooden box. They stood at a distance, whispering, laughing, shaking their heads. A few even took pictures on their phones, uploading them online with captions like, "The crazy box lady of Main Street." Comments poured in, and the mocking only grew. And still, she never opened it. It frustrated people. They wanted to know. They wanted to prove their theories right. And the longer she kept the box shut, the more convinced they became that it was worthless. To them, her refusal to reveal its contents was evidence that there was nothing inside worth seeing. She was just another homeless woman clinging to trash, and the box was her symbol. One evening, as the sun went down and the streetlights flickered on, a group of teenagers approached her again. They had seen the online posts and wanted their own proof. "Come on, lady," one boy said, crouching down in front of her. "Show us what's inside. We'll leave you alone if you do." His friends laughed and pulled out their phones, ready to record. The woman said nothing. She turned her face away, hugging the box so tightly her fingers trembled. "See?" the boy said to the camera. "Empty. She won't open it because she knows." The others nodded, satisfied with their conclusion. They walked away laughing, sharing the video before they had even turned the corner. That was how the story grew. Not from truth, but from assumption. Not from compassion, but from mockery. And the more the story spread, the less anyone cared to ask who she really was, or why the box mattered so much to her. To them, it was a joke. To her, it was everything. And while the rumors carried on, no one could have guessed that one day, when the box finally opened, all of their laughter would be replaced with silence. The day he arrived, no one noticed him at first. He wasn't from the neighborhood, and unlike the regulars who passed by with their routines, he paused when he saw her. The woman sat in her usual spot, hunched against the brick wall with the wooden box gripped tightly in her arms. People streamed past her without care, but this stranger slowed his steps, his gaze lingering. He was different from the others who stopped only to mock. His expression wasn't twisted with disgust or curled in amusement. It was softer, curious. He watched the way she stroked the lid of the box with her thumb, the way her lips moved as if whispering words no one else could hear. Something about it pulled him closer. For days, he noticed her. Every morning when he walked to work, she was there. Every evening when he returned, she hadn't moved far. The cup at her feet was rarely full, often just a few coins rattling in the bottom. He saw the way people treated her, heard the laughter, the cruel jokes. At first he thought maybe he should keep walking like everyone else. After all, She didn't speak, and she didn't look like she wanted company. But the longer he watched, the harder it was to ignore. One afternoon, he stopped. He crouched down near her, careful not to invade the small space she had claimed as her own. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. The woman looked up with wide eyes, startled that someone had spoken to her without mockery in their voice. She didn't answer. Instead, she held the box tighter, her shoulders tense. "I can get you something to eat," he continued, keeping his voice calm. "Soup, maybe. Bread. Would you like that?" He wasn't sure if she would respond at all. For a long moment she didn't. Then, slowly, she nodded once. That evening, he returned with a paper bag of food. He set it beside her cup without asking for anything in return. She eyed it cautiously, then glanced at him as if waiting for the catch. But there was none. He simply gave a small smile and walked away. The next day, he brought more: an apple, a sandwich, a bottle of water. Each time she accepted it in silence. It wasn't just the food that drew her attention. It was the fact that he never once mocked her, never asked about the box, never tried to touch it. Unlike the others, he didn't see it as an object of ridicule. He saw her. By the end of the week, he finally sat down beside her. She shifted uncomfortably, but didn't push him away. "I see you have something important there," he said, nodding toward the box. Her fingers twitched, gripping it tighter. For the first time, she spoke. Her voice was raspy from disuse, barely above a whisper. "It's mine." "I believe you," he replied softly. "You don't have to show me. I just wanted you to know I'm not here to take it." Her eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them back quickly. People had always wanted to mock, to grab, to force her to prove herself. But here was someone who didn't demand anything, someone who offered without taking. It unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain, but it also warmed something inside her that had long gone cold. For the first time in months, she felt a small shift, like maybe not everyone in the world had forgotten what kindness looked like. And though she didn't trust him yet, she allowed herself to hope, just a little, that this stranger might be different from the rest. But the others weren't done with their games, and soon their cruelty would push her to a breaking point, one that would change everything. The next morning, she was already sitting in her usual place when he arrived. The wooden box rested firmly in her lap, her thin hands folded over it. She looked tired, as though the night had offered no rest. He carried a small bag with him, and without a word, he set it beside her cup. Inside was a sandwich wrapped in paper and a bottle of water. For a long moment, she didn't touch it. She watched him, eyes wary, waiting for the cruel words that usually followed. But he didn't say anything. He just sat on the curb a short distance away, giving her space. Finally, she reached for the sandwich. She unwrapped it slowly, as though expecting it to vanish. When she took a bite, her lips trembled slightly. She hadn't eaten all night. After a while, he said quietly, "You don't know me, but I've seen how people treat you. I'm sorry for the way they act. You don't deserve that." Her eyes flicked toward him, uncertain. She clutched the box tighter, her knuckles pale. "They laugh," she whispered hoarsely. "I know," he replied, "but not everyone will." She turned away, not answering, but she didn't tell him to leave either. That was something. Over the next few days, he came back regularly. Sometimes he brought food. Sometimes he just sat nearby while she held the box. He never asked questions about what was inside. He simply acknowledged it without judgment, as though it was perfectly normal for her to guard it so carefully. Slowly, Her shoulders began to loosen when he was around. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, painting the street in orange light, she finally spoke more than a word. "You wonder about it," she said, her voice uneven. He glanced at the box, then back at her. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. But it's yours. You don't owe me an explanation." Her lips pressed together tightly. For a moment, she seemed to be fighting an internal battle. "It's all I have left," she whispered. The weight in her tone made him pause. He didn't push further. Instead, he nodded. "Then it must be very important." Her eyes softened just slightly. She studied him, as if trying to decide whether to trust him with more. But before she could, a group of teenagers passed by. They spotted her, and instantly the mocking began. "Still hugging that box, lady?" One boy sneered. Another mimed cradling a baby, saying in a sing-song voice, "Don't cry, little box. Mommy's here." Their laughter filled the street. The woman flinched, shrinking into herself. Her hands trembled as she tried to shield the box from their stares. The man stood quickly, his jaw tight. "That's enough," he said firmly. The boys looked surprised at first, then snickered. "You sticking up for her?" one of them jeered. "Why? You want the box, too?" He stepped forward, his eyes steady. "I said that's enough." His tone left no room for argument. The teenagers muttered to each other, but eventually walked off, their laughter fading. The woman looked at him with wide, wet eyes. No one had ever defended her before. She hugged the box closer, rocking slightly, her voice breaking. "They want it. They always want it." He crouched down beside her again, his voice calm but firm. "Then hold it tight. It's yours, not theirs. And if they come back, they'll have to get through me first." Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say more, but the words caught in her throat. She looked down at the box, then back at him, as though weighing a decision she'd been carrying for far too long. For the first time she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Someday, maybe I'll show you." It was a fragile promise, one born from fear and the faintest flicker of trust. He nodded gently, knowing not to rush her. What neither of them realized was that someday was coming much sooner than she thought, because the mocking wasn't over. It was only about to get worse. The tension had been building for weeks. Each day the mocking grew bolder, more cruel, as if the teenagers and passersby were daring each other to go further. The woman clutched her box more tightly than ever, her arms stiff, her back pressed hard against the wall. She barely slept. When she did, it was light, restless, as though she expected someone to rip it from her arms at any moment. That day started like the others. She sat on her corner, box in her lap, eyes lowered. People walked past with glances sharp as knives. A few muttered insults under their breath. She had learned to endure it, but her grip on the box never loosened. Then came the group. 5 of them, teenagers who had harassed her before, their laughter loud and careless as they strutted down the sidewalk. They spotted her immediately. "Look," one of them sneered. "The crazy box lady's still here." The others broke into laughter. They didn't stop at words this time. One boy swaggered closer, crouching low so his face was level with hers. "Come on, let's see it. What's inside?" His hand darted out, grabbing for the latch. The woman let out a sharp cry, curling around the box, her entire body shaking. "No, no!" Her voice cracked with desperation. The boy laughed harder, pulling back but only to taunt. "She acts like it's gold," he said. "Probably just junk." The others circled her, their shadows falling over her frail figure. "Maybe we should just take it. one girl suggested with a smirk. "Find out for ourselves." Before they could move, a voice cut through. "That's enough." The stranger had returned. He stepped forward quickly, his face hard, his tone leaving no room for argument. The teenagers turned, their laughter faltering. "Oh, look," one muttered. "Her boyfriend's here." He didn't flinch. "Leave her alone," he said firmly. "Now." The group hesitated. There was something in his eyes, steady, unwavering, that made even the boldest among them pause. One boy scoffed, kicking at the pavement. "Whatever. She's not worth it anyway." But his voice lacked conviction. They lingered a moment longer, muttering to each other, before finally moving on, their laughter fading as they disappeared down the street. The woman was still trembling, her arms locked tight around the box. Her eyes darted wildly, as though expecting them to return. She rocked back and forth, whispering under her breath, words too soft to hear. The man crouched beside her, his voice gentle now. "It's all right. They're gone." She shook her head, clutching the box so tightly her fingers ached. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They always come back. They want it. They want to take it." He looked at her, then at the box. For weeks he had held back his curiosity, never pressing her for answers. But now, seeing her so broken, so desperate, something shifted. "You don't have to show me," he said quietly. "But if you ever want to, I'll listen. No one else has to see. Just me." Her eyes flicked up to his, filled with fear, but also a flicker of something else. Relief. She studied him for a long time, searching his face for any trace of mockery, any sign of deceit. She found none. With trembling hands, she loosened her grip just slightly. "They won't stop," she said, her voice raw. "They'll never stop until they know. Maybe it's time." The man didn't move, didn't push. He simply nodded. "Only if you're ready." She closed her eyes, rocking once more. Then she drew a shaky breath and whispered, "Tomorrow. I'll show them tomorrow." She didn't know yet that tomorrow would change everything. The box that had brought her endless ridicule was about to silence every cruel voice around her. But for now, she held it close through the night, bracing herself for what was to come. The next day, the street was unusually crowded. Word had spread that the woman was finally going to open the box. Nobody knew exactly how the rumor started, but once it did, people came from every direction to see for themselves. The teenagers were there first, grinning with excitement like they were about to witness a show. Adults lingered nearby, pretending to be uninterested but edging closer with every minute. Even strangers who had never noticed her before now gathered, curious about the woman who had become the talk of the neighborhood. She sat in her usual place, the wooden box resting in her lap. Her hands trembled as they clutched it, and her breathing came uneven, shallow. The stranger stood at her side, his presence steady, his eyes fixed on the crowd that pressed in around them. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. But she shook her head. Her face was pale, her lips dry, yet her voice carried a quiet strength. "They'll never stop unless I do." The teenagers started chanting, their voices loud and mocking. "Open it! Open it! Open it!" Others joined in, some laughing, others filming on their phones. The sound grew until it filled the street, a mixture of jeers and curiosity. The woman's grip tightened. For a moment, it seemed she might change her mind, might curl around the box again and wait for the crowd to disperse. But then, with a trembling hand, she reached for the rusty latch. The noise around her grew louder, phones raised higher, laughter sharper. The stranger knelt beside her, his voice steady. I'm here. Take your time. Her fingers struggled against the corroded metal. The latch resisted, as though it too wanted to keep its secret hidden. Finally, with a faint click, it loosened. The crowd leaned forward. Slowly she lifted the lid. Inside the box was not garbage, not scraps, not emptiness. There, neatly arranged despite the years, were photographs, old, creased at the edges but carefully preserved. There were letters, tied together with a faded ribbon. And there, gleaming faintly in the sunlight, were medals. Real medals, each etched with words of honor and service. The crowd fell silent. The teenagers who had laughed the loudest now shifted uneasily, their smirks fading. One woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The photographs showed the homeless woman years ago, standing proudly in a uniform beside a man in the same attire. Smiling children stood between them. A family, a life. The letters, written in elegant handwriting, were addressed to her from loved ones who had once filled her days with warmth. And the medals, they told a story of bravery, of sacrifice, of service to a country that had long since forgotten her. Her hands shook as she lifted one of the photographs, holding it up for the crowd to see. Her voice, though cracked with emotion, was steady. This is who I was. This is what I had. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. And this box is all that's left. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of her uneven breaths. The teenagers lowered their phones, ashamed. The adults looked down, unable to meet her eyes. The mocking had vanished, replaced with something none of them expected. Guilt. The stranger placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her as she closed the box again, cradling it with the same fierce care. But this time, the crowd saw something different. Not madness, not weakness, not a joke. They saw the truth, and the truth left them speechless. No one spoke. The silence after the box opened was heavier than all the laughter that had come before. People stood frozen, staring at the medals and photographs burned into their memory. The same teenagers who had mocked her every day suddenly found themselves shifting uncomfortably, their faces pale. The smugness was gone. Their phones, once raised high to record her humiliation, now hung limply at their sides. The woman clutched the box to her chest again, but this time she didn't look afraid. Her eyes, red from tears, held a tired dignity. She had shown them the truth, and now there was nothing left to prove. A man in the crowd finally cleared his throat. She served? His voice cracked with disbelief. Another person whispered, "Those medals, they're real." Heads turned, eyes darting from one person to another, searching for someone to break the silence. But no one had words. The weight of what they had done, the cruel laughter, the insults, the years of treating her as less than human, was pressing down on them all at once. One of the boys who had tormented her the most tried to speak. His voice was low, ashamed. "I didn't know." His words trailed off, swallowed by the guilt in his throat. His friends looked down at the pavement, their sneakers scuffing nervously as if they could erase what they had done by scratching at the ground. The adults weren't any better. A woman who had once smirked and whispered cruel jokes now stood with tears welling in her eyes. A man who had told others she was crazy couldn't bring himself to look at her. They had all assumed. They had all judged. And now, every assumption crumbled in the face of the truth. The stranger remained beside her, steady and unshaken. He had never needed proof, but now that the proof was laid bare, He saw the others struggling with the same realization. She was not the person they had made her out to be. She had been someone with a life, a family, a story, and they had mocked her pain without ever caring to know it. The woman spoke softly, but every word carried across the crowd. "You laughed at me," she said. "You called me crazy. But this," she tapped the box gently, "this is all I have left of the people I loved. My family, my service, my life." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "And you made me feel like I was nothing." The crowd winced. Her words were sharper than any insult, because they were true. They had stripped her of her dignity long before the box had revealed its contents. One by one, people began lowering their eyes. A few stepped back, unable to face her gaze. Others turned away completely, retreating into the safety of silence. But the shame lingered. The teenagers stood motionless, their earlier bravado shattered. For the first time, they didn't see her as a joke. They saw her as a woman who had endured more than they could imagine, who carried her memories in a fragile wooden box, because it was all she had left. The stranger reached out and gently helped her close the lid. She held it to her chest again, but her grip had changed. It was still protective, but it was no longer desperate. The truth had been shown. The burden of secrecy was gone. The street was quiet, the usual noise replaced by an uneasy stillness. And in that stillness, everyone understood what they had done. Their laughter, their cruelty, their whispers. They couldn't take them back. But they could never see her the same way again. The woman lowered her head, exhausted. She had carried this weight for so long. And now, at last, the world had seen it. Whether they liked it or not, they knew who she truly was. And for the first time, the crowd had no laughter left to give. The days after the box was opened were not the same. The corner where people once laughed and pointed had changed. Those who used to mock her now passed with quiet glances, some unable to meet her eyes at all. The cruel jokes stopped. The laughter that once echoed down the street was gone, replaced with awkward silence and the occasional nod of respect. The teenagers didn't return in the same way. When they did, their voices were subdued, their shoulders hunched. One of the boys even set down a paper bag of food near her cup without saying a word, his face red with shame. The girl who had once taunted her avoided her gaze, clutching her phone tightly but refusing to raise it. They didn't apologize outright, but their silence spoke louder than their jeers ever had. For the first time in years, the woman wasn't invisible. People who had once crossed the street to avoid her now stopped to place a sandwich or bottle of water by her side. A few sat with her for a moment, not to interrogate her about the box, but simply to share company. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They finally saw her as a person. The stranger kept visiting, as he always had. But now his role had shifted. He wasn't just the one who had shown her kindness when no one else would. He became her advocate. He spoke to a local shelter about her, explaining her situation and what she carried. At first she resisted, clutching the box tightly when he brought it up. "This is my home," she whispered, glancing at the corner where she had sat for so long. But he shook his head gently. "No. This is where the world forgot you. Let's find a place where you can be remembered instead." His words stayed with her. Slowly, she began to trust him, enough to walk beside him when he guided her toward help. The shelter offered her a bed, clean clothes, and hot meals. At first she brought the box everywhere, sleeping with it in her arms. But over time, as her body regained strength and her spirit found a small spark of peace, she placed it on the shelf beside her bed, always within reach, always safe, but no longer her only anchor. The box became more than her burden. It became her proof. Proof that she had once lived, served, loved, and been loved in return. When volunteers asked about the photographs, she showed them. When they asked about the medals, she explained, her voice steadier now, though always tinged with sadness. For the first time, people listened. Back on the street, her absence was noticed. The corner looked emptier without her sitting there, clutching the wooden box. People who passed by remembered the day it opened and the silence that followed. Some still whispered about it, but their tones had changed. The crazy woman with the box was no longer a joke. She was a reminder of what they had done, and of the humanity they had almost ignored completely. As for the stranger, he never stopped visiting her. He brought her food when she first settled in, but soon their meetings turned into conversations, long talks about life, loss, and resilience. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it was faint, fragile, and real. The box remained with her always. She never let it out of her sight. But now, when she touched its lid, it wasn't just with fear. It was with reverence, with a quiet acknowledgement of the past that had shaped her. They had mocked her for holding on to it. They had called her crazy, laughed at her pain, dismissed her as worthless. But when the truth came out, their laughter died, and in its place grew something she thought she had lost forever: respect. The woman who had once been a punchline became a story, not of pity, but of strength, not of madness, but of memory. And the wooden box, worn and scarred, became a symbol of something greater than the ridicule she endured. It became a reminder to everyone who saw it: never judge what you don't understand, because you might just be mocking a treasure you can't begin to imagine. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.